Today, we are going to discuss about the teaching of all the Buddhas, Sabba Papassa Akaranam. Now, who is a Buddha? Buddha is an awakened one, an enlightened one who has attained Bodhi. Attain Bodhi means has realized the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are truth of universal suffering, dukkha satya, truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya satya, truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha satya, and truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, magga satya. Now, there are three types of Buddhas: Samma Sambuddha, Silent Buddha, and Savaka Buddha. Now, Samma Sambuddha is a perfectly enlightened one who has realized the Four Noble Truths by his own effort with no assistance from any teacher. The Samma Sambuddha, having gained enlightenment as a Samma Sambuddha, can teach the Buddhist doctrine and the path of liberation of suffering to others. Now, silent or Pacceka Buddha also realizes the Four Noble Truths by his own effort with no assistance from any teacher. But a silent Buddha cannot teach the Buddhist doctrine or the path of liberation to anyone else. Now, the third type of Buddha is Savaka or disciple Buddha. And they are also called Arahants. Now, an Arahant realizes the Four Noble Truths by learning and practicing the Buddhist path of liberation from a Samma Sambuddha. Now, in Buddhist teachings, 28 Samma Sambuddhas have been mentioned, beginning with Tanhankara, Medankara, Saranankara, Deepankara, Kondanya, Mangala, Sumana, Revata, Sobita, Anomadassi, Paduma, Narada, Padumuttara, Sumeda, Sujata, Piyadassi, Attadassi, Dhammadassi, Siddhatta, Tissa, Kussa, Vipassi, Shiki, Vessabu, Kakusanda, Konagamana, Kasyapa, and Gautama. So the last Samma Sambuddha to appear in the world was Lord Gautama Buddha. There are some world cycles when there is no Samma Sambuddha at all. And there are other world cycles when there is either 1, 2, 3, or 4 Samma Sambuddhas. But we are fortunate enough to be born in a world cycle where there had already been 4 Samma Sambuddhas, and it is said that the future Samma Sambuddha called Maitri will appear in the same world cycle. So the last Samma Sambuddha to appear, being Lord Gautama Buddha, the present dispensation is called Gautama Buddha Sasana, dispensation of Lord Gautama Buddha. Now, Lord Gautama Buddha was born into a royal family as Prince Siddhartha in a place called Lumbini in the present-day Nepal. Being a royal prince, he grew up with all the royal comforts, and he was protected from witnessing any human suffering outside the palace. But when he was a young adult, he witnessed suffering in various forms. He saw old age, illness, and death. And when he came to know that this human suffering is common to everyone, including himself and his loved ones, and that shocked him. And he wanted to find a way out of human suffering. So at the age of 29, he left home and became a homeless ascetic. He went to two of the most famous meditation masters during that time and learned concentration meditation from them and became an expert in developing various deep mental absorptions. But Buddha knew that it will not bring complete eradication of suffering. And then he left those teachers, and for the next 6 years, he practiced severe austerity and self-mortification, believing that it will bring enlightenment and liberation from suffering. And during those 6 years, he was supported by 5 ascetic companions. But he discovered that severe austerity and self-mortification did not bring what he was looking for. So he gave it up. And he started meditating under a Bodhi tree in a place called Bodh Gaya, India. And he meditated on in-breath and out-breath, and that is Anapanasati Bhavana. And he was successful. Through meditation, he managed to destroy all his mental defilements and realize the Four Noble Truths. So at the age of 35 years, he attained enlightenment as a Samma Sambuddha. Having gained enlightenment as a Samma Sambuddha, he started teaching the Buddhist doctrine and the path of liberation to others so that they could also cultivate the same path and liberate themselves from suffering. The Buddha's first sermon was delivered to his former ascetic companions. And having listened to the Buddha's discourse, they realized the Four Noble Truths and became arahants. Soon after that, another 55 people came to listen to the Buddha's teaching, and they also became enlightened as arahants. So by then, the Buddha had 60 arahant monks as disciples, and the Buddha sent them away, asking them to teach the Buddhist doctrine to others for their own good and welfare. Then the Buddha traveled to a city called Rajagaha to meet King Bimbisara. When he was an ascetic, he met King Bimbisara, and King Bimbisara requested the ascetic Siddhartha to come and see him if one day he became enlightened as a Samma Sambuddha. On the way to Rajagaha, the Buddha met a group of 30 young men who listened to the Buddha's teaching, and they also became arahants and ordained as Buddhist monks. And then another group of 1,000 disciples who were disciples of 3 ascetic brothers called Uruvela Kassapa, Nadi Kassapa, and Gaya Kassapa. They also listened to the Buddha's teaching, became arahants, and ordained as monks. Now, when Buddha arrived in Rajagaha, King Bimbisara listened to the Buddha's teaching, became a disciple, and he donated the Veluvana monastery to the Buddha. And that was the very first monastery that Buddha accepted from the disciples. Then 2 friends called Upatissa and Kolita, along with the 250 friends, they listened to the Buddha's teaching, and they also became arahants and disciple monks. So by now, the Buddha had well over 1,250 arahant monks. Now, one evening, the Buddha addressed this congregation of arahant monks and delivered a sermon called Ovada Patimokha. And that means disciplinary advice to this congregation of arahant monks. This sermon consisted of 3 verses. The main verse is Sabba Papassa Akaranam Kusalassa Upasampada Sachitta Pariyodapanam Etam Buddhana Sasanam. Sabba Papassa Akaranam, not to do evil. Kusalassa Upasampada, to cultivate wholesome. Sachitta Pariyodapanam, to purify one's mind. Etam Buddhana Sasanam. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. On another occasion, while the Buddha was staying at Jetavana monastery in Savatthi, Venerable Ananda, who was Buddha's chief attendant, asked the Buddha, Venerable Sir, were the teaching of all the previous Buddhas to the monks same as the teaching of this Buddha? And the Buddha said yes. And the Buddha repeated the same 3 verses. And it is said that for the first 20 years of the Buddha's dispensation, this advice was enough for the monks and nuns to maintain good disciplines. So Buddha did not have to formulate any disciplinary rules for the first 20 years. Now, let us look at the Buddha's first instruction, Sabba Papassa Akaranam. Sabba means all, Papassa means unwholesome, unskillful, evil actions, deeds. Akarana means do not engage in. So Sabba Papassa Akaranam means do not engage in any unwholesome evil deeds. The unwholesome deeds cause harm to oneself, to the others, and both. And they will also lead to a rebirth in unfavorable, suffering worlds. Now, Buddha described 3 unwholesome roots, akusala mula, based on all the unwholesome actions are performed. Greed or craving, that is the desire to experience happy and pleasant sensory experiences. Hatred, all degrees of ill will, animosity, aversion, anger, and delusion, distorted thinking, false beliefs. So the 3 unwholesome roots are greed or craving, lobha, hatred, dosa, delusion, moha. And based on these 3 unwholesome roots, 3 types of unwholesome deeds can be done. That is, unwholesome bodily actions, unwholesome verbal actions, and unwholesome mental actions. In a discourse called Salayaka Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, that is the collection of the Buddha's middle-length discourses, the Buddha described 10 unwholesome actions, and they included 3 types of unwholesome bodily actions, 4 types of unwholesome verbal actions, and 3 types of unwholesome mental actions. Now, the 3 unwholesome bodily actions are killing any living beings, stealing or taking what is not given, sexual misconduct. And the 4 unwholesome verbal actions are false speech or lying, slanderous speech, harsh speech, and idle chattering. The 3 unwholesome mental deeds are covetousness, ill will, and wrong view. This covetousness is craving to have and possess things that belong to others. Ill will includes several negative emotions like anger, aversion, irritation, fear, grief. Wrong view, in another discourse called Mahachattarisaka Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, Buddha described 10 aspects of wrong view. If one believes that there is no merit in almsgiving, no merit in large offerings or small offerings, there are no results of good or bad actions, there is no special person called a mother or a father, there is no this world or another world, and there are no instantaneous births, and there are no ascetics who can develop special powers to see this world and other worlds and say that to others. So if one believes in these 10 matters, one possesses wrong view, micchadushti. So the Buddha's first instruction was to refrain from all unwholesome actions, bodily actions, verbal actions, and mental actions. Now let us look at the second instructions, that is kusalasa upasampada. Kusalasa means wholesome, skillful, good deeds. Upasampada means commit, undertake, cultivate. So cultivate or engage in wholesome deeds. So the wholesome deeds are wholesome physical, verbal, and mental actions, which are beneficial to oneself, to others, and both. And these wholesome, skillful actions can lead to happiness in this life and rebirth in happy worlds of existence. The three wholesome roots on which the wholesome actions are based are non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. Now, wholesome bodily, verbal, and mental actions can weaken the unwholesome roots of greed, hatred, and delusion, and also purify and clean the mind to some extent. So there are three types of wholesome deeds: wholesome bodily deeds, wholesome verbal deeds, and wholesome mental deeds. So these are the opposites of the 10 unwholesome deeds. Three types of wholesome bodily deeds, that is, to abstain from killing any living beings, to abstain from stealing, to abstain from sexual misconduct. And the four types of wholesome verbal deeds are to abstain from false speech, slanderous speech, harsh speech, and idle chattering. The three types of wholesome mental deeds are to abstain from covetousness or greed, to abstain from ill will, and to abstain from having wrong views. Now, in the Punnakiriya Vattu Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya, that is a collection of the Buddha's numerical discourses, the Buddha described three types of meritorious actions, and that is giving, dana, good moral conduct, sila, and mental development or meditation, bhavana. So three meritorious actions are dana, sila, bhavana. In later Buddhist commentaries, these three meritorious actions were expanded to 10 meritorious actions. And they are giving, dana, moral conduct, sila, meditation, bhavana, paying reverence to holy persons and elders, apachayana, service to others, veyyavaccha, sharing of merit, pattidana, rejoicing in others' merit, pattanumodana, listening to the Buddha's doctrine, Dhammasavana, teaching the Buddha's doctrine, Dhammadeshana, and straightening one's wrong views, Dittijjukamma. So the wholesome and meritorious actions, they prepare the ground for the next stage of mental development. And the third instruction contained in the Buddha's verse is Sachitta Pariyodapanam. Sachitta means one's own mind. Pariyodapanam means cleansing, purification. So Buddha's third instruction is to purify one's own mind, because the human mind is defiled by several types of mental defilements, such as latent tendencies, anusaya, fermentations, asava, mental hindrances, nivarana. Now, Buddha has described 7 latent tendencies, anusaya dhammas, in the Anusaya Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya. And they are latent tendency of sense pleasure, aversion, conceit, wrong view, doubt, desire for existence, and latent tendency of ignorance. Buddha has also described 4 fermentations, also, and they are sense desire, desire for continued existence, wrong views, and ignorance. The 5 mental hindrances which can obstruct development of concentration of the mind during meditation, sensual desire, kama chanda, ill will, vyapada, sloth and torpor, thinamidda, restlessness and remorse, uddhacha kukkucha, and skeptical doubt, vichikiccha. The Buddha described these 5 mental hindrances in a discourse called Avarana Sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya. Now, how to purify one's mind? And that is through the practice of Buddhist meditation called bhavana. And as you know, there are 2 types of Buddhist meditation. Firstly, concentration or tranquil meditation, samatha bhavana. And secondly, insight meditation or vipassana bhavana. Now, the aim of concentration meditation is to develop a state of deep concentration or one-pointedness of the mind, and also to develop tranquility of the mind. And this is done by focusing one's attention on a single meditation objects. In the Buddhist literature, 40 meditation objects have been described that are suitable for concentration meditation. And one has to find one of those 40 meditation objects that is suitable to one's character and temperament. Most commonly used meditation objects are in-breath and out-breath, that's anapanasati, qualities of the Buddha, Buddhanusati, 32 loathsome parts of the body, kayagata sati, death, marananusati, and loving kindness, metta bhavana. Now, as the concentration of the mind becomes deeper during meditation, different stages of calmness and joy called deep mental absorptions or jhanas arise. Now, in these jhana states, the mind becomes pure and those mental hindrances get suppressed. But this purity of the mind is temporary. And Buddha has described 8 such jhana states that one can develop. 4 fine material jhanas, rupavachara jhanas, and 4 formless jhanas, arupavachara jhanas. Now, this concentrated mind developed through concentration meditation can be used as the base to develop insight meditation. Now, insight meditation is developing the mind so that the meditator is able to see things as they really are, and that will lead to eradication of mental defilements and final liberation from suffering. And that is the state of Nibbana. So Vipassana is a Pali word. Vi means intensive, deep, clear, and Passana means seeing or perceiving. Now, concentration meditation has both a Buddhist and a non-Buddhist background. But insight meditation or Vipassana Bhavana is unique to the Buddhism, and it was discovered by Lord Gautama Buddha during the process of enlightenment. Now, mindfulness is a key aspect of this insight meditation. Now, one can define mindfulness as one's ability to attend objectively without judging to one's experience from moment to moment at the present moment. And in the Satipatthana Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha has described 4 foundations of mindfulness. That is contemplation of the body, kaya anupassana, contemplation of the feelings, vedana anupassana, contemplation of the mind, chitta anupassana, and contemplation of the mind objects, dhamma anupassana. Now, Buddha stated in this discourse that the 4 foundations of mindfulness that the Buddha described are the direct way to purify all mental defilements, to overcome sorrow and lamentation, to destroy all the suffering, mental grief, and to enter the Noble Eightfold Path and to realize the Nibbana. Now, when one practices insight meditation, that helps the meditator to gain an insight into the 3 common characteristics of all mental and physical phenomena that exist in this world. And that is, all mental and physical phenomena are impermanent, anicca, leads to suffering, dukkha, and there is no stable entity called self or soul, anatta. So through the insight meditation, the mental defilements can be permanently removed, while the concentration meditation, they are only suppressed, with the mind purified on a temporary basis. So the fundamental teaching of all the Buddhas is contained in the verse, Sabba Papassa Akaranam, not to do evil, Kusalassa Upasampada, to cultivate wholesome, Sachitta Paryodapanam, to purify one's mind, Etam Buddhana Sasanam. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. Thank you very much.